Hey, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Sapience webinar series. We appreciate all the folks that join and attend and follow these events. Today's topic is people analytics, what's changing the game for leaders of external workforce services. And a couple of notes before we get started. We are recording today's session, as we always do. Post the event, the recording will be available off of the Sapience website and off of our YouTube channel, and we will also make sure that we email the link out to all of our registered attendees today. We always encourage questions. We've got a number of folks attending today, so please type your question into the console, and we will answer as many of those as we have time for towards the end of the session. Those that we don't have a chance to address on the webinar itself, we will make sure that we get back to you in person. I would now like to introduce Bruce Starr, who's our guest expert today. Bruce is a founder of Starr Business Consulting Services. He's also a Sapience advisor. As you can see, Bruce has a very distinguished career and background in the sourcing and procurement space. Previous companies that Bruce has been part of, Morgan Chase, BNY Mellon, Credit Suisse. So a lot of pedigree and a lot of expertise in large organization, large enterprise, complex sourcing strategies, and the management of those vendor relationships as those agreements are struck. So with that, Bruce, I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I'll throw the first question at you.
Great. Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me today. I get very excited about procurement, and so I'm looking forward to having this discussion with you.
Very good. So let's start with this, Bruce. Your perspective on the role and how it's changed over the years that you've seen the function and the responsibilities of procurement. What are some of the new expectations for those running a procurement organization, the sourcing leadership, particularly as it relates to external labor and those kinds of agreements and constructs?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think to answer the future, I'm going to go backwards a little bit and then come forward. So back when I started in procurement, which was actually a firm called Solomon Smith Barney, and it was actually a firm that Jamie Dimon was in, and it was a very entrepreneurial type of firm, where you really rolled up your sleeves to get things done, and especially from a procurement perspective. And it was during the time before these procurement platforms were rolled out. So, really it was about making good business decisions with the money that we were spending on behalf of our clients in the firm. And then as time went on and these procurement platforms came into place, things got very specific in terms of what had to be done. And we were moving away a little bit from managing a business and managing a friend to the step-by-step process for a procurement event. And so, now we are where we are today, and there's a big change coming about in procurement from what I see. And it's really going to mesh the best from the entrepreneurial spirit of procurement in terms of making great decisions on how we're spending money, but also taking into account all the good step-by-step processes that we've seen from these platforms, and so and that's where really AI and what I say data is coming into place. It's really going to be key, because procurement is really, the people in procurement are going to be relied on to be doing much more technical kind of work, making good business decisions, whereas they're going to be these bots that's going to be created from the AI world, where procurement has a problem right now that there's just too much being thrown at it for them to do the appropriate job. But these procurement events will be run probably even by the clients with some approval by procurement. But procurement's going to be relied on to take on the more complicated kind of deals, and obviously the bigger money kind of deals to make these strategic decisions. So all the things that procurement has done well in the past, AI is going to be able to do, like benchmarking and demand management, the RFP process, and then it's really going to be up to the procurement executives to be able to make good, smart decisions with the data that they're now going to have at their fingertips, which really is including the optimization of the resources and being able to determine perhaps maybe there's a resource that's working tons of overtime, maybe 150% of capacity, somebody who we might lose if we don't take care of them, and that's probably somebody we definitely don't want to lose. And whereas we'll be able to track the capacity of other workers that could be at 50, 60, or 70% threshold. So
Right.
this data is going to be very, very key to strategic decision making.
So Bruce, you and I just spent the last 2 days together at the Contingent Workforce Summit here in Dallas. There was a statistic that we heard that organizations now may have as much as 40, in some cases even 50% of their entire global workforce will be an external provider of some form providing that workforce for them. So I've got to suspect that shift in the workforce dynamic, right, from, and I don't know what the number might have been prior, but let's say from 20 to now 40, right? And even more importantly, the trend is towards an increased reliance on external. So if that's the case, I'm suspecting the CEO is taking an even more heightened interest in the role of the procurement organization, the sourcing leaders. That role is elevating as the workforce is changing, and procurement is such a critical component to bringing those relationships on and managing them. So is the CEO mandate to the procurement organization, is that evolving as the workforce structure is evolving as well?
Yes, exactly right. So, I look at procurement and the data that it has right now is really having a knowledge deficit, and it needs more data to become much more strategic.
So when you say more data, we're talking in a workforce context, then people analytics types of data sets and workforce analytics data to help the procurement leader be successful in their role.
Exactly right. And this is going to help procurement stay relevant and produce the kind of results that the executives are looking for. And they're also looking for procurement to show agility. And this kind of data will allow it to show the agility, stay relevant, make strategic decisions, as well as being able to the best save is not needing the resource that's being requested. So if this data will show us that we have a number of workers at 60, 70, 80% of utilization, and the procurement organization can be strategic here and say, hey, we have one area that's requesting a worker. The utilization is not high, but we have another area, where the utilization is, well over 100% for the people. They need help. The CFO could say, well, we have limited dollars. Let's be strategic, and let's put the resources where they're really needed today. and this is where procurement has that seat at the executive table, helping the executives make the right decision.
So people analytics, it sounds like it's a powerful lever for the procurement organization. And I'm in reference to the solution that Sapience provides, it does give the ability to an organization that's deployed our solution into their environment to see the capacity, the utilization levels at the aggregate level, at a department, at a BU level within an organization. You've mentioned a couple of times the potential that organizations might have 30 or 40% even of available capacity. So that's obviously one of those key levers. Are there others that come to mind, Bruce, when you think about the levers that data analytics, people analytics specifically provide the procurement organization, and what the outcomes that type of insights can drive?
Yeah, actually, you wouldn't think of it, but it does in terms of software and software utilization. It's very interesting to be able to get the statistics on what applications these workers are using and compare it to the expectations of the managers. And this kind of data can be supplied. And then, lo and behold, if some application which was viewed maybe as being very strategic and spending maybe a lot of money on, is not being used because the experts and the users just aren't using it. It's giving you great data for your software asset management as well.
Interesting. So, Bruce, put yourself in the role of procurement leader for an enterprise. You've got people analytics that's been running within your external provider relationships, external labor provider relationships. You're looking to initiate a new contract with a provider with your organization. Does the data today that's at the fingertips of a procurement organization that's deployed this kind of solution, does the data today change the way you would look at perhaps how you'd structure a new contract versus the way you might have done it, let's say, just 10 years ago?
So, Matt, two things come to mind. One, I think you want to make sure you have the audit rights clearly defined, because certainly as a customer of a contingent labor firm, you want the ability to be able to go in and make sure the time cards that are being submitted are actually correct compared to the actual time spent. So I would do that. And then I would also have a discussion, with the suppliers and say, well, maybe you shouldn't be invoicing us as you have in the past, based upon the time cards that are being submitted, when we can actually have the actual time that's worked, and we can create the invoice each month for that worker.
Significant change in the way the business has run in this external labor world for decades. If that kind of a pivot were to happen, I could see changes from both sides of the equation, right? I suspect that if you went to that approach, the labor providers are going to be compelled to right-size the resources that they're deploying into the organization. It's also going to put pressure on the organization as well to make sure they're leveraging the capacity of the teams that are put in place, are provided by those external resource providers. So that's a really interesting point of view, and we'll have to track that to see as organizations start to look at that kind of an approach. I think it's very innovative.
Well,
so
Matt, maybe let me interject with that. So, what this creates is a much better vendor management discussion and program, where you're really both looking to optimize the resources that are being supplied. So certainly the vendors want to be a partner with you, and they want to make sure they're creating value and that they're trusted, and the resources are making as big an impact for you as they possibly can. And so now with this data that's available, we can work together, with our vendors and optimize the best results for everyone.
You're suggesting a really different way that these relationships roll, Bruce. In one of the sessions I attended at Contingent Workforce Summit, the discussion of what data do you share with your vendors and what data do you not share came up, and there were different points of view on it, certainly, but what you're describing is a much more mutual and strategic relationship, I think, from both sides. So I was going to ask you how you envision that people analytics changes the existing relationships with providers, and I think you just answered that question in a really insightful way. I mean, providing the analytics to the company that has a vested interest in performing what your organization expects when you bring them on board as a new vendor or as perhaps a long-standing vendor. I suspect that data would be very powerful for them as well. So
yeah, I think so. I think so too. Now, it may not be smooth sailing from day one. This is a transformational change for these vendors, and at first, it might hit them hard when you're going to go to them and say, hey, we've been paying for services that we haven't gotten. How do we solve this?
right.
But yeah, I think over time, as you work it out, you will get to that point where the relationship has you both thinking the same way. How to be most effective and a great strategic partner for the firm.
So it sounds like this, if you're beginning a new relationship with a provider, if you're in the middle of a relationship with a provider and you've implemented the solution, it's going to have the potential to change the structure of that relationship. If you're sitting in that seat, you run procurement for an organization and you're looking at recompetes or renewal cycles with your external community, is that the right time to introduce this kind of an approach?
It is, and we're talking mostly about contingent labor right now, but the truth is, this works with your fixed price contracts as well, because as you say, when you come up for your renewal
Great
time,
point.
the provider might say to you something like, we're going to need to add more resources to be able to get done what you want for us in the time.
I suspect you heard that a few times.
Exactly. But now being armed with the levels of who's working on the account and the hours that they're in, now I'm coming to the table armed, and there's really full transparency, which from a procurement perspective, that's really what we want. And we can have a much better discussion when something like that is brought up to us. So, when you're doing a fixed price contract, what I've always done in the past is I want some sort of estimate in terms of the resources and the level of resources that the vendor will be putting on a project. And so now I can go back and check to make sure something close to that was provided, and that's how that fixed price contract was priced, based on that.
So you mentioned a few examples, Bruce, of the different outcomes and benefits that people analytics drive. You mentioned against a T&M environment, you mentioned fixed price, you mentioned software metering. If you're thinking about as a procurement lead, how do you start to prioritize what are the outcomes that this is going to drive for me? Where do I focus first? Any recommendations that you'd have for procurement leaders today?
Well, let's see. Transparency is the goal. Being strategic is what we need to do. We need to continue having close relationships with our clients, understand what they're looking to accomplish, and be able to work with our vendors with all that information to structure the right deal.
I think you're making such an important point. I'll go back to that um, suggestion that external labor in all its forms for the large enterprise and large mid and companies of all different industries, we continue to hear this perspective that it's a larger percentage than ever, and it's increasing as more and more organizations are facing a number of realities of the shifting demographics of the labor pyramid, of the optimization that an external labor resource can provide to the organization to scale up and down as capacity drives. You've brought up this point a few times about the transparency relationship with your vendor. I think that the innovation to me that drives between the relationship, I can only imagine that makes for better outcomes from the buyer perspective as well.
And Matt, another example, we've all read about these cases in articles. With the whole COVID and the work from home, there unfortunately have been some people who are working multiple jobs, multiple full-time jobs at the same time. And so, now you have a mechanism to be able to check to make sure that that's not happening to your firm.
Yeah, that's another great point. I mean, we know we're not going back to the 5 days a week in office environment across the board. I mean, some organizations are experimenting with different levels of return to office and what that's going to look like. And that same concept, I assume, it extends to the external labor community as well that they manage. So it's a really great point that you've got to have that sort of visibility of the workforce to know, because we do know that that's happening, right? There's plenty of independent surveys that validate that that's a reality. So yet another great example of one of the outcomes. So your perspective, Bruce, how long, let's say you've just put a solution in place, right, that can drive, that delivers a people analytics set of data deliverables to the organization. How long is it taking a provider, a buyer to see the results and to be able to turn that into actionable outcomes for their organization?
Well, because this has been going on unchecked for so long, the results are, immediately discovered. So, I would say in your first 30 days, you're going to see a tremendous discrepancy between what you're paying for and what's actually being worked. And then in terms of the process of, meeting with your provider and having that initial tough discussion with them, I would say 90 days, you're getting some incredible results and getting an ROI that's through the roof.
I'm going to throw a question at you, Bruce, before we wrap, that was just texted into us. So put yourself in the seat of the provider now, and you're being told, look, our enterprise has put in place this people analytics solution. Here's what the data has shown. We're only getting, let's say, 65% capacity out of the organization that you provided to us. How is that provider going to react? And what are some suggestions or recommendations that you have if that kind of a conversation, when that kind of a conversation occurs?
Well, I mean, the truth is, you have the facts, so there's really not much debate with the provider. So the provider will acknowledge what happened. They certainly don't want to support charging you for hours that you didn't receive. And then, you as an organization need to decide, how do you want to go forward? Are you requesting a refund for those hours? Are you requesting a credit to be used for more services instead? Are you requesting, you know, more resources, utilizing the benefit that you just discovered? So that's going to be your decision. But any provider who wants to have a long-term relationship with you and you present clear facts to them, it's certainly not going to be in their best interest to have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you're pointing out a number of different ways that the data is the data as you're describing, right? And that's indisputable. You're pointing out that there's a number of different relationship outcomes that this can suggest for organizations. And I suspect, as most large organizations will have a mix of providers as well. So maybe some of those relationships go one path and others might follow a different trajectory from some of the remediation, if you want to call it that you just described. So it's yet another great example that you're offering here. Again, you're describing, Bruce, an environment that is going to evolve, it sounds like, very rapidly as people analytics becomes more pervasive in the relationships that organizations have, not just internally, but with their external labor, and how those contracts are structured, how payment terms happen, and so forth. So you've given great insights. I'll let you have the last comments here. As you are looking at the future role of sourcing and procurement leaders, we know that these trends that we now see reshaping organizations, the drive towards AI and AI automation, insights-driven decisions, not companies running just on long-standing relationships and hallway anecdotes, but actually being data-driven as you're describing, and then these evolving demographic trends. How do you see these trends impacting the role of procurement going forward, and particularly from the point of view of people analytics and its ability to help leaders adjust?
Well, I think the advice I have for who are going to be the successful procurement leaders in the future, we see AI coming. We know how critical data is to the AI process. Now is the time to start looking into and start making some changes on how you're going to do things. You have some time before this big wave of change comes. Probably within the next 3 years or so, that this big transformational wave, will be there, and you need to be ahead of it, because if you keep waiting, it's going to be very, very hard to get caught up so quickly. So I would start speaking to your vendors, understanding their roadmaps, making sure they're going where you want to go, and if they're not, figure out who it is that will, and then the changes that you can make today to bring more data that this AI engine will be eating and be so important to this big transformation. Start making those relationships today, so when as that big change is happening, you're a little ahead of it instead of being far behind it.
Well, that'll be the difference between organizations that are driving innovation at the front end of the curve, as you've just described, or coming late to the party and putting relationships at risk, putting the organization at risk. Things are moving too fast in this environment to allow that to happen. So, Bruce, thank you very much. Your insights are fantastic. We appreciate all of the information that you've shared with our audience today. For anyone looking to get in touch with Bruce, you can see his information there, with Sapience as well. We would love the chance to have conversations with you if you're in this role of procurement management, overseeing external relationships. We can share some examples of the outcomes that we drive, and some of the case studies that might be helpful to you as you're thinking about how you chart your future here. So thank you, everyone, for attending today. We appreciate it greatly, as we always do. As I mentioned, the recording will be made available to our attendees. It will also be available on the Sapience website and our social channels as well. So, Bruce, have a great rest of your day. Everyone who's joined us, enjoy the rest of your afternoon or evening, wherever you might be. and we'll do this again next month.